If you can have a seat, please. Evgenia? Okay, welcome back, guys. So the idea of this session is to have a conversation with some of the faculty, like a more informal conversation. The idea is if you have any questions about the research, about mentoring, about the program, about anything, feel free to ask the participants here. I'll be the moderator, so and well, the idea is to have fun and have an informative session. Okay, so we have with us Dimitri, hi, Jie, we have Dennis, Gang, and Yifan. Okay, so we have different, let's say, types of faculty, right? Some of them are more senior, some of them are junior. So, okay, let's get started. So, does anyone want to ask a question? The first question for the audience.
If you're asking questions, you put the microphone down to this point.
Right.
So you can have it on Zoom.
No questions? Okay, let me start with the first question. Okay. And I have plenty of questions here, but all right. So let me ask the panelists. So let's say a student is not sure about doing a master's or a PhD, right? What would you tell that student? I mean, what advice would you tell them, right? And I think the answer is like, how I guess it's related to how much different PhD is from master's, right? So who wants to answer this question? Who wants to start?
I can start. So first of all, I would say if you are really not certain about the PhD or master, the quickest answer is do a master. So if you really need to be motivated to do a PhD, it's a journey to be a PhD. It's probably 5 years. Then you have to really want to have the motivation to do research to be successful when you do a PhD. However, if you want to know more about this question, I would ask you the question that say, how much do you want to do research, or do you want to just get a better skill to better prepare for industry job? If you just want to better prepare yourself to do an industry job, then that's a master. And if you want to contribute yourself, contribute your time to the human knowledge, to human being, then you should do a PhD. Okay, that's my quick answer, but I want to hear some other panelists.
So I think a simple answer is to look at the masters and the PhD we generated 10 or 20 years ago. What are they doing right now? Do you like to do their job or master right now, PhD, because the training purpose is different. PhD, I think, training is that you're supposed to create knowledge lifelong. Solve problem that's not solved. Master, I think it's between the undergrad and PhD, but I think it's more like giving you knowledge so you can solve real problems. So it's more like not solving new problem, but existing problem better. So the two kind of lifestyle in terms of how they spend their 9 to 5 or 24 hours per day is totally different. Look at them and you will have your answer.
Just something to add very quickly. Usually when a student asks me this question, I start asking a student a whole bunch of questions like, why do you want to get PhD, right? And then we get into a little bit more deeper discussion on the pros and cons, right? And when we have this discussion, I want to make sure that students understand all the pros and cons of doing PhD, right? Of course, it's going to be longer, but at the same time, it opens up sometimes great opportunities. And students have to give up something, obviously, while doing PhD. So usually I try to explain to the students all the pros and cons and try to question them so that they hopefully look deeper inside to come up with the answer themselves.
Here.
And another thing to consider is that we also have MS/PhD. So this can give us this can give students more flexibility. So this may come with some additional restrictions. So you need to be you need to do your research when you apply and you get admitted here, but it gives you more flexibility. But if your focus is research, then my advice would be to do PhD.
Okay, so you guys mentioned something about producing knowledge, right? That's what a PhD is, producing new knowledge. So what type of knowledge can we produce, right, in computer science? And because maybe some students may have this concern, like, I want to have something very practical that can be applied right away, right? But maybe in some cases that's not possible. So what do you have to say about that? Anyone? Yeah, we'll get there.
I think this will depend on the area, like in the lightning talk. Different area will should have problems with different time span, right? More theoretical ones, probably, the knowledge will be applied many years later. For something like I do, so I think the time span is within 5 to 10 years. I typically don't work on things beyond 10 years later. So like we solve real problem from real patient, has to work conceptually while you're a PhD student. And then after you graduate, you can do a company. So, but this doesn't apply to other area as well, which is more theoretical. So it depends.
I want to add one point saying you need to separate between entrepreneurship and doing PhD. So you are generating knowledge, new knowledge, but rather than producing a fully functioning new product, right? You are helping those companies to build a new product, but you don't have to build the new product on your own. Elon Musk can do that. And then if you want to go towards that direction, that's totally okay, but it's hard. And so it's something you need to talk with your advisor, saying which direction you want to work on. You want to be slightly more practical, and I think your advisor will be able to guide you towards a direction that's more practical.
So something that I would like to add is from my area of research, which is software engineering. There is a big debate which is happening on Facebook and Twitter in my community. And one group of people is advocating that fundamental research is more important than practical research. And another group of people is saying, no, we actually have to be taking real problems that companies have and formulate our research agendas based on the problems that everyday developers are facing. And there is this big dichotomy sometimes that I'm observing. And I personally think that both are really important, because it's important to lay out foundations, but it's also important to go after real problems. I may be even as controversial as to say that it is also important to dream about the future and potentially even solve the problems that don't exist today, but they will be the problem in the future. And it's actually really interesting for me to observe how different people in the community react to that. But I think that as far as you're doing high quality research that will have impact, that's what is important. Here.
Yes, I totally agree with that. So you can talk to your advisor about which way you want to go, more practical or more theoretical. In terms of the more practical research, like my research area, which is all about this deploying this existed big application, you can find it's really fine, because you will find that your solution will be adopted by even supercomputer computer or even large company, you can feel achievement based on your experience. But also you can be more theoretical, like doing the research, which is building the system that hasn't been exist yet, do the experiment based on the simulation, and that's also very fine because you can find out what the future will be look like. So yeah, I think both way is we can enjoy both way. Just talk to your advisor about which one you want to go with.
So on Zoom, there is a question.
We have a question on Zoom from Saeed. He would like to know more about MS program in COR.
Can you take it?
Is Andreas, you're the expert in COR, and would you like to? But also, you can talk about the computational masters, right? Is it okay if we involve other faculty members in? Because it's better to have it from the expert.
As long as I finish within time. Computational operations research, COR program, is something that is under our wings administratively, but it's completely taught by the math department in computers at William and Mary. It is a master's program. It is highly involving statistics, simulation, operations research type of work. It's a very nice field in the sense that there's a lot of industrial jobs associated with that. I'm not in the math department, so I cannot answer more questions about the curriculum there, but there is a very good program which has been going now for more than 20 years. So there's a lot of people to ask about their graduates and where they find jobs. There is another one, and that's the one that Dennis referred to me. That's the master's and actually PhD as well with the computational science specialization. You don't require much about this. What you need to do is to have some sort of applied area in your mind, perhaps take a course outside computer science to supplement what you need in order to solve problems in that other area. But your focus has to be computational. In other words, it has to be computing, right? So if I do research and I do a PhD in only mathematics, that is not computational science. Computational science is the numerical or other methods or algorithmic ways, or even high-performance computing ways to solve problems in other areas. In that sense, it's very, very general, and I think most of you guys are doing computational science under that term, right? Any other specification on these two programs? Okay.
All right, thank you, Andreas. Is there any other question?
We have another one. Jaman, he would like to know when's the admission decision for spring semester.
For graduate admissions?
He did not specify, but we could say both.
Yeah, okay. Dennis, when is the?
So as some of you might know, there is also, or you may not know this, but many universities in the US signed an agreement that to basically handle applications so that all decisions by students need to be made by April 15th. So that basically drives our decision-making process. The application is due on March 1st, and we try to make decisions very quickly. So usually it's going to be by April time, even sooner, when we start sending letters out. So.
But that's for the fall semester, right?
Yeah, that's for the fall semester.
How about for spring?
For spring semester, we are sending decisions right now. So that's when spring decisions are due. Yeah.
Okay. Any question from the audience? Don't be shy. Okay. Let me take another question, and it's about students, recruiting students. So what do you look for in a student? Either PhD or master student? Anyone wants to start? Dimitri.
So, for example, for PhD students, what I'm looking for is passion for research, desire to explore, to kind of always push on the edge, and being curious. I think it is very important, and of course, regular skills. Being able to work on some task and produce some results. But so some of these skills that I mentioned in the beginning, like being able to explore on your own, are very important, I think.
Yeah, I think that for PhD students, I expect the students to be the lifetime learner in the future. So that's the most important thing, and also. I think the students should be excited about the learning new knowledge or finding new things. That will be important. Yeah.
So I don't think I'll be able to give you a complete answer. It's like a neural model, which has been trained over years. So when I talk to the student for an hour or so, that's when I know whether we can get along and whether we would enjoy working together. So maybe you should ask my student, David, who works on interpretability, right? To look into that large scale neural language models to try to explain the features that would give you an answer to your question.
Yeah, for PhD students, so I'm looking for basically two things. First thing, I'm looking for whether the student is taking initiative, is self-driving. I think this depends on the advisor's style. I'm a style that I'm not going to, check a student every day what they are doing. So I hope student is taking initiative and treat advisor as an advisor, not a manager. You're seeking advice. It's your job to seek advice. Typically, an advisor will advise more than one PhD student. So if you want to take advantage of this teamwork, being able to drive yourself is number one. Otherwise, there is no teamwork. You're just work by yourself, just under the name of advisor, right? Number two, I think for the teamwork to work as a team, you need to be able to communicate with your advisor reliably. I really mean reliably. If your advisor give you some comments, if you silently dropped it, you think your advisor will remember? Probably not. If you don't remember, it's harder for your advisor to remember. So if you want to work with not just an advisor, anyone, you need to be self-driving and also reliable in communication so that you are able to take advantage of all the resources that are presented to you.
Okay, so I want to separate two parts. One is technical skills, and then I don't think anyone, I work on GPU architecture and also computer architecture simulation. I don't think anyone really have the background in that direction. So I really care about programming skill, but other than that, I don't really care about computer architecture background. So in terms of not beyond technical skills, I really care about motivation. So motivation is something really blurry, but I care about how I communicate with you. Are you initiating the communication with me? If I send an email, how soon you can reply it? I don't expect you reply in 5 minutes, but to probably say, can you reply in 24 hours? That's something I'm expecting. So I really should see you care about this opportunity. You care about research. Then that's the good sign that I want to hire you.
We got another question from Saeed. A respected faculty member said we can do MSc first if we are unsure about whether we want to do PhD. In such cases, will it be appropriate to do master's in COR? In other words, is it normal to start PhD after MS in COR?
I think it should be normal, right? I mean, actually, we have applicants that have had a master's in different domains, not related to computer science, actually, and that's fine as long as they show a good background in computer science and they have the motivation to do a PhD in computer science. So I think it's totally normal to do a master's in core.
Another question from Khadija. I had my master's transcript graded in French grading system, but written in English. I would like to know if this affects my application in any way.
I'll take this.
As far as transcripts are concerned, they need to be official and they need to be sealed and sent directly from the school to William & Mary. And that's a requirement. If they require translation, then it needs to be translated and certified, but still sealed and sent directly to William & Mary. The student should not be taking part of the process.
Any questions? Yes.
What is your expectation before ending scaling program? I mean, like you have to publish 3 or 4 papers, journal paper or something, any unit or any topic.
Okay, so the question is, what are the expectations that you give to your students for graduation, for graduating from a PhD, right? In terms of number of papers or something else, right? Somebody wants to start?
So there's no one answer that could fit all students. So it depends from your area. So in some areas, you're expected to publish a little bit more. In some areas, you're expected to maybe publish less because each paper would take several years to complete. And also it depends on your goals, what you expect to do after you graduate, right? So if, for example, your goal is to stay in academia and become a faculty somewhere, usually it implies that the number of papers that you want to put on your CV is a little bit higher than in industry, right? But usually you are expected to publish at least 2 or 3 papers. So that is, for example, from my side, but other faculty, they could have a different number in mind. So there is no official number. So it depends from the faculty and also from the committee where you will be defending your dissertation.
So I agree. It depends. It depends on the area advisor. In my case, I've been very fortunate having really good students. In some cases, students wanted to do more than I expected them to do. So let me give you a couple examples, not for the ones in the audience, but who graduated. I had the student Marty White, who I said, that's what you need for your dissertation. And he said, no, that's not enough. I'm going to do this and this. And I couldn't convince him to do less, basically. So another one is Mario, who was so self-driven that I had to battle with him sometimes to just, you have more than enough. It's 2 acts that you need, that you still wanted to do more. So I guess I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question. But I'm really looking for students who driving and who are so passionate about it that they're not gonna just tell me what I need to do as far as bare minimum is concerned.
Yeah, this is a very difficult question. I think it's also kind of personal. Faculty member may have different opinions. And also actually, finally, it's not just an advisor, it's a committee. What's a committee decision about whether you're ready for graduation, right? So I think ideally, we're trying to see a student who is mature enough to be able to generate new research lifelong. Acquiring that capability is what we as advisor has been aiming for. We want you to graduate, then you can be independent and still do good research. However, students may come into the PhD program with all kinds of reasons. Some may just want to get a degree, not necessarily do research, which is not the ideal case we want. But many great students coming here with much higher goal even than what we expect. They'll do more and more. Just think about after you graduate, what do you want? You want to be a programmer? Then number of papers may not matter that much. If you want to be a faculty member, then not just number of papers, but quality of paper matters a lot, right? So I think as like in my personal area, so I will work with the students, say, what's your goal, right? If you already get a job in Google, you want to progress there, whatever, doesn't make much sense to keep pushing you too much to generate papers. But you need to meet the minimum goal, right? The committee feels that you're good enough. For other students, like Dennis mentioned, I also have some students, they want to stay longer to get more result, also a significant result, so they can land a better faculty job. So this really depends.
So I find this question very interesting because a lot of students may ask this question before joining the program, but not a lot of students will ask after joining this program because like after 2 to 3 years, typically there's no confusion. Like when you feel you are ready, you should be able to graduate. Then I don't see anyone that in my experience, even from my PhD institution and from here, I don't see anyone who feels ready to graduate but cannot graduate. Then if I have to say an expectation in terms of my personal group is 2 papers submitted, 2 papers accepted, the 3rd paper submitted is my expectation. Okay.
Yeah, I can do that. So there is this question from Shazardu and said, I have 35% undergrad CGPA with 2.5 years industry experience. Is that enough for being your program? Is he welcome or not? So, I mean, GPA is one of the factors that we consider for admission, right? And it's important. But there are other factors as well, right? We consider industry experience, right? Potential for doing research if you have publications, if you have worked on projects, right? Maybe your bachelor's degree or your master's degree, that also counts. That's it, essentially. Or do you want to add something, Dennis or gang?
Yeah, I want to add something because I served in the admission committee for some years. I'm still in the committee. So we do look at the GPA, but we don't look at the GPA just as a number. What we want to find out is that does the student has a necessary computer science background so that a student can be successful here as a PhD. So if your GPA is super high, then that you already answered the question, but if your GPA is low, we will still look at other parts of your application. Say, does a student demonstrate, research experience or industry experience to working with computer science skills? We want to see the signs that you can do well in our PhD program. I see probably that's a more fair answer.
Just to add something quickly, if you got C in your astrophysics class during COVID lockdowns, just explain it in your application. We are all people. As far as there is a good explanation and story behind, we're not just going to look into the raw numbers. I have another question here from Syed. He's asking, what is the intention of MS leading PhD programs when we already have separate MS and PhD program?
So essentially, what is the purpose of MS/PhD program, right? I'll take it.
So it's a tricky question, but I think I need to give you an honest answer. So one issue that we've had in the past with some international applicants is sometimes they would apply to our program to get funding, but their real intention was just to stay for a master's. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why we primarily admit international students to PhD program directly. And at the same time, we do have this option, MS/PhD option, that is available for domestic students who don't have master's degree yet. But those students most always demonstrate significant interest in PhD degree to start with. But they can be foregoing in the application and say, I'm pretty sure I want to do PhD, but I still would like to decide whether that's the option I want to go with. And that's the reason why we have this option for domestic students. Andreas.
Isn't it true that, well, isn't it true that we cannot give a master's, the second master's, the same degree, somebody already has a master's?
on computer science, they cannot enter our MS PhD program. Like that.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a very good point. So if you already have masters in computer science, you cannot get second masters. So you have to go directly to PhD. Yes, thank you.
There is another question from Balaram. It is about the English requirements test. So he's asking, does CS department accept IELTS score? If so, what is the minimum requirement, or what are the tests that you accept? We do accept IELTS and TOEFL. The minimum requirements, not sure. It's in the website, I think. Do you remember what is the minimum?
It's graduate school. Whereas GR dictates the minimum.
Yeah, I mean the specific, let's say, minimum score is in the website, so we can give you the link where that information is available. We don't have it handy. Questions? Yes, one question over there.
Yeah. How can we determine this computer science, not mathematics, neither pretty far. And when we grow up and idea, how can we know the equation in the hierarchy from computer science engineering?
Okay. The question, there were two questions, I think, at least. So one question was, what is the scope of computer science? And how can we find out if what we are interested in falls into computer science? Is that what you're talking about? Anybody? Oh.
So the first question is, how do you determine if a research area is considered as computer science, right? So I would say you better find someone who is the closest, like not only in William Mary, but any researcher in the closest field. Now find where the researcher is publishing papers and look at if the paper is submitted to some IEEE or ACM conferences, branches, or some other like related community. Now, if it's a computer science related community, then that should be related to computer science. If it's like, say, mathematical equation deriving, this type of like proving, it's probably not computer science. What's the second question?
Yeah, we have when you how can we know that what was in the hierarchy from the research?
So I try to understand your question. The question is, if you have an idea, then you don't really you have an idea that you want to work on, then but there's no faculty that is working on exact problem. So okay, so you can still find the closest faculty and talk to the faculty, then probably give a pitch, like persuade the faculty this is a good idea. Then the faculty may accept this idea and start work on that. Then if the faculty wants to continue work on that, the faculty needs to apply some external funding to support you working on that direction. So it eventually will be either NSF or just some funding agencies or some companies will support your research. Then you can start to work on it. Okay.
So I think the question is a little bit philosophical, right? You're asking, am I doing computer science or am I not doing computer science? Okay, so I think you're asking a very philosophical question. Is what I'm interested in computer science or not? Is this what you're asking? Because at the end of the day, engineering, you think there is a hierarchy between science and engineering, right? And I'm sorry to say that this is not a hierarchy, it's a spectrum, and that spectrum is very blurry. You cannot tell one from the other. But I can answer that question in a very specific way. Engineering is when you apply an idea correctly. All right. So we all agree that engineering is a very valid thing and we should do some of it in what we're doing so we can keep ourselves practical. We can keep ourselves relevant, right? So let's say producing software is an engineering task. Clearly, I'm producing something that people use. Good. Is this science? So it's not easy to answer, right? Because sometimes in the process of making this software, you're answering questions, both theoretical, both scientific, and sometimes both engineering. So if your contribution is to find new engineering techniques, not apply known ideas to produce products, but if you are producing knowledge even on engineering, that's a scientific method, right? You're producing knowledge. You're a scientist.
I want to add something to this. I think it's a very interesting topic. I almost touch this topic every time I teach my graduate level class. So probably many students still remember my answer. My answer is that, can you write down one research question that ends up with a question mark? If you can successfully write down a question with a question mark to say, for example, how can I use accelerometers on my smartphones to detect whether the cat is eating, right? If you can successfully write down question with question marks, then the answer will be, okay, I have this algorithm, these solutions, these features to this, right? This is science. So another thing I think is at William & Mary, we don't have separate electrical engineer, computer engineer, in addition to computer science. So science and engineering in many universities are combined together, like EECS, right? ECS or whatever. So something for you to know, in early years when I was at William & Mary, I purchased an oscilloscope that was sent to the physics department. Nobody believes that a computer scientist will use that. I do use oscilloscope, I do use soldering guns. So we do have a lot of engineering sense when we develop the science. So yeah. Probably I can talk to you after the meeting.
And just something quickly to add, Yefan pointed it out, and I think this is a really important practical consideration. In many respects, we are constrained on things that we work on, which are constrained by the funding that we get to work on specific directions, right? So let's say if you bring your faculty and you have your startup package, you can fund students, they can work on anything they want, anything you want. It's open-ended, right? But the moment you get an NSF grant, there is a commitment, right? You need to, you submitted a proposal, you have your proposed work. That's what you are committed to do and deliver. Of course, there is a lot of room and freedom, what you can do within that particular research direction, but still, you have your constraints, you need to deliver. So that's something that, of course, unless you get fellowship, right, that comes with you, then you can do anything you want. You just find an advisor to advise you. But that's an important practical consideration as well.
Okay, before we get to the question, David, let me ask a question to the panel about mentoring. So how do you work with your students? How do you mentor them to become successful researchers and professionals? Anyone?
Since I'm sitting on the side, I will start. Then I typically have meetings with my student. Then at the beginning, I think the meetings can be even as often as daily. Then it can be quite often. If the students need hands-on support, then I'm happy to provide hands-on support. I will write the program with my student, but gradually, I think around the second to third year, there's typically a point that a PhD student will find, say, I know more than my advisor on a particular direction. Like this typically happens in second or third year. Then after that point, I probably will reduce my meeting like down to once a week. Then after at the fourth to fifth year, I think the student should be able to lead me to work on direction, and the student should have an opinion in that direction, should have something the student wants to work on. Then the relationship becomes from instruction to giving feedbacks. Now, at the end, I want the student to write the papers on his or her own. Then I would be as a collaborator and provide feedback and want the student to update in a certain way. Okay, of course, the student should have their own judgment to say if my feedback is a good one or bad one. So sometimes everyone may give bad feedbacks, but at the beginning, most likely your advisor will give you good feedbacks. Okay.
Okay, in my opinion, like my personal experience, I think it depends on students. The way I advise depends on specific student, or even for the same student, depends on which year you are. I think students who came in don't have too much background, then probably it's less advising, but more like teaching. Like you're teaching a class, you really have to tell the student what exactly to do. But then with years keep going on, a student can a little bit can stand by himself. I want to, instead of telling a student what to do, I tended to just ask the right questions for the student to figure out himself or herself, because you learn most when you are in the process to finish the problem. What not just an advisor tell you what to do, you just become the advisor's hands to get it done, right? That's more like an undergrad or master, in my opinion. So then when the student is even more senior, like close for graduation, probably you want to challenge your students. The best way is to, give the student a problem, but without a solution, or even don't tell the student any problem. Challenge a student to find a problem he can work with, she can work with, or even advise some junior students in this group, because that's what you're going to do after you graduate.
Yeah, so just I think it's a really, really important question. It's like one of the most fundamental questions, and everybody is different. Everybody is different. Some students can write day one. Some students cannot write in their fifth year. Some students come in as experienced software developers who can dive into large code base and make changes day one. And for some students, it's take a couple of years to get up to speed to become a decent developer. So what I try to understand as early as possible, I try to understand, of course, students' goals, what they want to do, academia, industry, but I also carefully observe their strengths and weaknesses. So what they are really good at from the beginning and things that just needs honing, and what they really need to catch up with, right? And at times I try to put them out of the comfort zone, knowing the limitation, of course, because remember that our job is very difficult, right? And we have so much power as advisors. We can break students, right? If we're not careful while pushing them. So that's very important. What I'm trying to do is in a very controlled fashion, push a little bit, keeping on the pulse, make sure nothing breaks, to put the student out of the comfort zone so that some real learning can happen, right? So the favorite part of my mentoring journey has been, it takes a couple of years, but, and sometimes, you have this student who comes in fresh, doesn't know many things, and eventually 2-3 years down the road, that, you just come into the office to have a meeting with them and you see a completely different person in front of you. You see a mature, independent researcher with whom you work as a peer, like as a colleague. And that's the part that I enjoy. The only drawback of this model is that you get to work with them in that mode for a year and then they're gone. And then you start from scratch.
Over here. Okay, we have one more question.
One more. So Alex is asking about the GRE requirements. If there is, I mean, he mentioned that there is no GRE score, that you are not requiring, Wilmer is not requiring any GRE score, but would you guys still recommend taking the GRE and submitting scores?
I think this. So the question is, so GRE is not required, right, currently?
So they're asking if it's still.
But if, do you advise taking the GRE and submitting the GRE into your application?
Right now, it will not make a difference. So if we have to compare two applications, one with GRE and one without GRE, we're not gonna somehow use GRE as a discriminating factor because it's not required. So that's basically the answer. If you have it and you want to show it, if it's great, sure, but we cannot use it as a discriminating factor. No,
Okay.
because we're not requiring it.
And just think of it. For years, so we will evaluate just at more points or something, or you can show it or something, just maybe something like that. Like I think you have here, you will add 5 more points, like that.
I think we consider is a percentile, not the number, right? Because that gives us an indication of where you rank in the across in a pool of students, right? But we have a minimum requirement anyway. Okay, so thank you very much, panelists and audience, and they're on Zoom for the questions. And yeah, let's thank the speakers. Coming up next, student panel.